Welcome everyone to the April 21st meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission. We are going, just as a reminder, we have some public online and some public in the room. If you're online, just raise your hand through the Zoom or by waving your actual hand, and we will have several opportunities for public comment. So please hold your comments until that time. Ready for the agenda? So we're going to review the agenda for tonight. We'll start with public comment, then we'll move to approve the minutes of the last meeting. We will discuss the topics of lot coverage and impervious surface, which is a follow-up to our last discussion. We'll talk about the natural resources overlay standards, minor and major subdivisions, and then we will have time to hear reports from our town planner and any liaison updates. We'll talk, we'll have other business, and then we will wrap up and plan for our next meeting, which is on May 5th, 2026, and then we will adjourn. Are there any changes needed for the agenda? Okay, there are no changes. So we will then open it up for public comment at this time. And this is the time when you can address the Planning Commission with items that are not currently on the agenda for tonight. Does anyone have anything? Chuck would like to come up.
And another thing, you've seen this before.
Can I just ask a question? Does the audience at home get to see Chuck's display where he's?
Yeah.
sitting?
Okay. Yeah, here.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to talk about the 10-acre zone.
It is a little hard to see because of the reflection of the sun.
No, you went the wrong way though.
There you go.
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can't see it.
Yeah, that looks good. Thank you.
I was just looking at the screen.
There we go.
So I want to talk about the 10-acre zone. You've seen this before. This is each of the zones and the percentage of the residential acreage that is in each zone, and why I think it's essential that there be movement in the 10-acre zone. The Riverside is 1%. That's of the residential acreage in Jericho. That's where we've put the bulk of our effort so far. Then there's the Riverside neighborhood, 1%. Jericho Corners is 3%. And you put in a town plan, I think it's correct that there really is not much opportunity for housing expansion in Jericho Corners. Jericho Center is just 1%. And also in the town plan, it says there's not much room for housing expansion in Jericho Center. We also banned condos in Jericho Center, 5 or more in the most recent revisions. In the commercial, the village and the 3-acre zone is where the HOAs really have, and the PUDs have an enormous effect. We have over 500 homes in neighborhoods that have riffraff clauses, basically banning infill or any kind of housing for middle-income people. And it really dominates these areas more so than you recognize really driving around. When I did the HOA stuff, I got all the maps and all the stuff on the internet to be able to go lot by lot by lot by lot. And that's what I've been doing, going through all through Jericho, trying to understand where the development opportunities are. And when you go up and down Brown's Trace and you're looking at the 3-acre zone, you see open space, but it's spoken for as part of PUDs. You know, Kettle Creek, you know, all those, we just consumed 30 acres building 9 houses next to MMU. I mean, that's quite common in the 3-acre zone. I also looked for lots that were between 3 and 6 acres that I thought, you know, someone could then break up into 1-acre lots or 3-acre lots. 3 acre lots in the 3 acre zone. And there really aren't that many. I mean, a lot of them, they are 3 acres or 4 acres, but they drop off, they slope, there's a house built on the best part of those 3 acres. When I look at the forest and ag land, on the land that I consider buildable, kind of next to the roads, not on hilltops, it's really already divided up into 10-acre lots. It's 10-acre lot with a big house, in most cases a big house, 10-acre lot with one house. And a lot of what we discuss isn't going to work. Like, we can legalize fourplexes and multiplex and fourplexes, but you can't build one unless we kind of change our view. We can't build a fourplex on a 10-acre lot that already has a house on it. The density, our density stuff has failed. And right now, to get the density bonus of a single house in the 10-acre zone, as I read it, you need 25 acres. Because you need to subtract the first 25% of your lot to create a PUD. And the density bonus is half a house. There's a 50% density. So you can't build half a house. So you need 25 acres. And you have to build 2 houses on 25 acres in order to get a density bonus of a single house. And you have, from the housing committee, I think, a really good proposal, which is to allow houses less than 1,200 square feet onto these 10-acre lots without having to add additional land. And we have historically had many clusters like this. About 2/3 of the houses from the 19th century no longer exist. And many of the ones that did are the big, well-constructed colonials in the town villages. And Jericho had many villages. We had 16 school districts, 15 of them with schools. And big clusters of houses. You really look at the map, you can see clusters of houses bigger than Jericho Center in South Jericho, Nashville, Lee River, a smaller one down along the Winooski River. And what I like about this proposal in terms of clusters on the 10 acres is that I like it better than what towns next to us are doing. Richmond has 1 acre zoning everywhere in Richmond. Across the border in Essex town, it's 3 acre zoning. You can build apartments anywhere you want. West Bolton, it's 2 acres. But if we were to allow these clusters, it would be kind of right now, the dominant form of sprawl in Jericho is large houses on 10-acre lots. And I think if we had more clusters on these 10-acre lots, I think it would be a development pattern that's consistent with our heritage.
So can you wrap
I'll
us
it
up?
by saying that that proposal allows for condos like we have at Starboard, 8 houses on 1 acre. It allows for rows of townhouses like we have at the end of Raceway. It allows for a mobile home park, which Williston Woods is between 4 and 7 homes per acre. You have a couple acres of the 10 acres in a mobile home park. You have, could have 12 or 14 homes. And I'll just close by saying that you can spend $800,000 to buy a house on 10 acres, and it gives you good schools and good government, honest government, and parks and libraries and good roads, but it doesn't give you the right to choose who lives next to you and what their lifestyle or what their housing is. And I think we have to create opportunities for people to live in these rural areas.
Thank you. Anyone online have public comment for items not on the agenda tonight? No, okay, so we are moving on. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 7th? Eric, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Chris Brown seconds. All those in favor of approving the minutes of April 7th, please say yes. Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay,
And no correct.
the minutes are approved. Okay, so now I will turn the meeting over to our planner, Chris Shaheen.
Thank you. Tonight we're continuing our work on looking at how to encourage housing outside of our village districts. Most of what we're talking about tonight is more tangential to this specific thing, but it's still under that framework. These are the recommendations that came to the Planning Commission to look at from the Affordable Housing Committee via the Select Board. I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly, but this is a review of the goals that we established early on, and then a review of the guidance. And there are no changes on both of those. For our timeline tonight, we are looking at natural resource overlay standards. We've been coupling our work on looking at housing regulations with looking at the forest block work that was done by the Conservation Commission and seeing how that could inform an update to the natural resource overlay. Also wanted to circle back on what I think the Planning Commission, I felt there was consensus on some changes to the number of lots for a major subdivision, but I want to circle back on that and just confirm that we're all in the same place on that. But first, I wanted to follow up on a clarification on lot coverage requirements and practical implications of what we have. This was raised at the last Planning Commission meeting. I think I see this more as an information item. I don't see any action, but let me share the information and we'll see what the Planning Commission thinks. So at our last meeting, we reviewed definitions for impervious surface and lot coverage. There was just a very minor change to make sure that stormwater was consistently used in both definitions. But this did prompt the question about how our lot coverage standards related to our new proposed lot sizes. So I'll share a quick assessment of what I did on that. But for that, surprisingly, I could find very little, well, actually could find no information on best practices guidance on lot coverage and impervious surfaces. Stormwater in Vermont is largely regulated by the Department of Environmental Conservation with some local review. I did go back and look at the Enabling Better Places guide, which was the guide that we used for updating our regulations to the village centers. That advised that there were requirements like for impervious lot for lot coverage and impervious surface just vary from town to town. That whatever you adopt should reflect current building patterns and just make sure that it's not restricting housing options. Jericho zoning does have some regulations related to stormwater. There are certain uses like gas stations that require a stormwater review, larger projects reviewed by the DRB that are that have over a half acre of impervious surfaces. So that's around 22,000 square feet of impervious surfaces need to go through a stormwater review. Development in sensitive areas like the River Overlay District. There are others, but that's just an example. And then any subdivision and PUD review that's going to the DRB gets reviewed for impacts on stormwater impacts. So I looked at our lot coverage requirements for the districts that we are thinking about changing the lot sizes for. So as a general measure, I looked at the smallest lot sizes that would be allowed. Lots can be bigger than the smaller lot sizes, but I just went with the smallest. I looked at what the percentage of the lot is within the setbacks, just as one measure. And then I took the studies that we had previously looked at to model those lot sizes and just did a quick mock-up with driveways and parking spaces and calculated lot cover just as a test case. So what I found was in the village district where we're proposing to go from 1 acre to 0.25 acres, the current lot coverage allowed is 40%. Within all of the setbacks, the lot is 32%. And then a mock-up with impervious surfaces comes up to 38%. So that's within that 40% lot coverage. For the commercial district, where we're proposing to go from 1 acre to 0.25 acres, it's a greater lot coverage amount. It's up to 60%. 30% of the site is within the building area, and a mock-up with impervious surfaces come to 35. So that's well under the 60% lot coverage. For the low density residential district, where we're talking about going from 3 acres to 1 acre, the lot coverage allowance is 40%. Within the building setback area, it's 44% of the site. But because it's a 1 acre site, when you mock it up with the development, the impervious surface cover only came up to 17%. I think the most interesting one was the PUD small lot size, which is 6,000 square feet. The regulations, as we're talking about them, allow for a 60% lot cover. It's 60% of the site exactly is within the building area when you take all the setbacks into account. And with the mock-up, the impervious surfaces still came to 56%. So I don't feel like we have an issue, but I didn't know if there are any questions, and I'm happy to answer that.
Clarification. When you say the driveways, parking and walkways, is that what those fill in as a percentage of the total lot size?
They count toward the total lot coverage for the lot.
So if you've got 32 buildable within setback, right, and then 38 is buildable with.
So it's 6% of. You add 6% for driveways, parking and walkways essentially.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but you can't put a building outside of those setbacks,
Correct.
but you can like pay for a driveway in those setbacks.
Okay, so we're losing none of the available space if everything is going within the setbacks. If the sidewalks, driveways, impervious surface are within the setbacks, no problem. And it looks like what you're saying is for all of those, they are not an issue at all.
Yeah, there's even a little wiggle room if you were to put everything just within those setbacks,
Okay.
which you're going to have to if you have a driveway that's off the street or a walkway, because every property is going to be at least 10 or feet or more back from the right of way. But then your houses you don't have any houses that are right on the property line. They're all going to be set back a little bit.
Yeah, it just wasn't quite clear to me that for me, with driveways would be how much of the lot coverage can I now do? And it looks like it gets to be a lot less, but when you define it the way you have, I get where you're coming from.
I don't have the illustration. I do have the illustrations, but I didn't put them in here. But the only one up here that actually has a driveway and parking is the Village District one. You can see the driveway going up the side and the parking behind it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there any need to include lot coverage and or impervious surfaces in the list of definitions?
Yes. And so that's what we looked at. That's actually what prompted this, because we currently don't have definitions for those two. So at the last meeting, we looked at these two definitions to include in the zoning as part of the update.
Is there?
I
I just didn't remember that at all.
I'm just giving a factual answer.
You exceeded your lot coverage.
No, it was a good clarifying question.
Still
Oh,
thank you.
I didn't mean for it to be a reprimand. Okay.
He said, bless your heart, that's Sherry. It's such a good question.
Great. Anything else on this? All right. So the next agenda item is reviewing proposed amendments for regulations of forest blocks and wildlife corridors that are in the NRO. So tonight, I'm looking for general feedback and direction from the Planning Commission. So tonight I want to recap on where we are with adding forest blocks to the NRO, what our previous discussions, conclusions we've come to. Then review the proposed standards. The standards that are being proposed, they're following how they are structured in the current regulations. So they may seem but there's a context for where they fit in the regulations. First, to define what uses are permitted or conditional within the resource. That's something that the NRO does because it identifies resources and then it says if a use is permitted or conditional. So applying that specifically to forest blocks. And then general standards specific to forest blocks. So some of those standards are going to be tied to a specific map resource. So there'll be standards for forest blocks. And then others guide how development is designed on a site within that resource, like a building envelope, and I'll get into that a little bit later. First, just a quick recap on the forest block assessment. The natural resource overlay currently includes high elevation forest blocks only. The consultant that worked for the Conservation Commission identified a total of 35 forest blocks throughout all of Jericho and ranked them for their ecological prioritization. And then the key takeaway was that for forest blocks to function better ecologically, they need to be connected to one another. The more they're connected to each other, the better value that they bring. The Planning Commission Working Group used a methodology to identify which of the 35 forest blocks that had been mapped as part of that study to add to the natural resource overlay. This was guided by discussions with conservation staff at the state and at the Regional Planning Commission. And then it was informed by looking at Jericho's future land use map and our zoning map. And after going through that process, we identified 11 that were most at risk and 13 that we thought had the highest integrity. And then what's shown on this map is those additional forest blocks added. But let me walk you through what you're looking at here. The dark green are the ones that were identified as most at risk, and those are mostly associated with the village and low density residential districts. The lighter green are forest blocks with the highest integrity, and those are generally associated with the forest district and the open space district. And then the dashed lines are the high elevation forest blocks that are already mapped, and there's no proposal to change that, but they would still stay mapped as high elevation forest blocks. We've also talked about the importance of updating the mapping of the wildlife corridors. They're currently identified as wildlife road crossings. We've been thinking of renaming them as either wildlife corridors or habitat connectors. I've just called them wildlife corridors in this presentation. And they're just closely associated with forest blocks in order to maintain their ecological function. They're currently mapped. You can see on the screen in the upper left corner, those pink blobs are what we currently have for the wildlife road crossings, and the information that we got from the assessment, it much more refined that. So it'll be a more accurate use of the information and have less of an impact on property owners by narrowing an area where guidance for protecting wildlife corridors would be in place. Now, before getting into the review of the standards and this,
Is that right?
oh,
I walked in the door. Oh, no. We're glad you're here. Sorry.
we're just getting to the meat of it, so it's all good. I'll maybe just to give a little more context for what we're looking at tonight. There are regulations in the NRO for how to protect and develop in or not develop at all within a natural resource. And they vary depending on what the resource is. So tonight we're looking specifically at standards that would apply to forest blocks, which is not something that is currently a resource on the NRO. We have high elevation forest blocks, and we're not proposing to change those standards. But with this new resource, they're similar to the high elevation forest blocks, but that's a different type of resource. So these standards are tailored specifically to the forest blocks. The draft regulations that we've come up with, they draw heavily from a document that's called the Community Strategies for Vermont's Forest and Wildlife Guide for Local Action. It's from the Vermont Natural Resource Council. And the working group also looked at some natural resource protections that Williston uses in their regulations. These are still draft. I still want to vet them with CCRPC and staff, and I want to circle back to some of the developers that I talked to very early in our work on zoning to get their feedback to make sure that what we're coming up with they think is workable. This slide gives a general overview of what the regulations cover. These slides give a general overview of what the regulations cover. They're not the full red line like we've seen for the other zoning amendments. Like when we were looking at the amendments for the low density residential definition, all that text was up on the slide. This was just a lot of text, so I'm not including all of that on these slides. These are more of a high level overview. So first, we'll talk about what would be a permitted and conditional use within the resource. So the NRO currently requires all uses that are permitted in a zone that are within a resource to be reviewed as a conditional use if it's in an NRO resource. Did you follow that? Okay. If you're in a zone and there's a permitted use and you want to put it within or impact a natural resource overlay element, it automatically gets reviewed as a conditional use.
Do you mean like where your building envelope is, or do you mean you want to develop on a parcel that has a smidgen of protected resources?
Think of it this way. If you have a riparian corridor and say you wanted to do something and it went into that riparian corridor and it's a permitted use in that zone, it has to be reviewed as a conditional use.
But if you have a corridor.
And you're not
That's
impacting
okay.
it. Correct. Right. So that is how uses in the NRO currently work. The only one that is not like that is the wildlife road crossings, and those can be reviewed by the zoning administrator. But everything else, it's a permitted use impacting a resource gets reviewed as a conditional use. We're proposing that to maintain that standard where it already exists for high elevation forest blocks, which are more fragile, they're less common, and impacts to them are more permanent and they're harder to mitigate. The recommendation for applying this to forest blocks is to allow permitted uses within the first 300 feet of the forest block. So if you have a forest block, you've got 300 feet is a standard measure for defining a forest edge. Beyond that, if you go more than 300 feet, you're in what's considered the core or interior forest. The proposal is that if you are building within that 300-foot edge, and it's a permitted use, it can still be reviewed as a permitted use. It would not trigger a conditional use review. Conditional use reviews automatically go to the DRB, permitted uses don't. There would still be standards that would regulate how much you can clear, but it would not trigger a conditional use review. Did that all make sense?
Yeah, it didn't on my first read of the amendment, so that's much.
Yeah, the upshot is that this discourages developing deeper into the forest, which you still can. It just triggers a conditional use review.
Question, which is gonna sound really stupid probably, but
Sorry, hang on.
okay.
We have an odd.
I'm gonna say that seems sketchy to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna not let them in.
Are you trying to get in? Okay.
Is anyone here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you're not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
No,
You're in the meeting. Got it. Okay. Sorry, Chris.
I just have a sort of a silly, I think it's a really silly question, but when you say, we're talking about forest blocks, are we talking about literally trees? Or are we talking about like natural resources that might contain trees but don't necessarily contain trees, or is it just trees? And part of my question, I guess, is that, you know, the history of Vermont is very dramatically with how many trees we have and don't have. And how does this, or would this be continue to be updated to reflect changes among the forested and non-forested areas in the future? And do we need to define forest? I mean, is it a copse of trees? Is it I mean, I guess and then anyway, so my basic question, first of all, was, what do we mean by forest block? Is it literally trees?
There's the answer is yes, it is literally trees, and we have a definition. We're creating a definition for forest blocks
Okay.
that would be added as part of this.
And when you say create, we're not making it up ourselves. It's a
We're-
state definition.
We're pulling it from other
Right.
sources and tailoring it to, yes,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
For your other question about the evolution of forest cover in the state, you cannot prevent anyone from cutting down trees as part of working lands, like if they are timbering or taking advantage of it as a natural resource that they're harvesting. You cannot prevent clearing from taking place. You can have regulations around clearing if it's for an activity that is not related to forestry.
Okay. And
Does that
reason-
answer part of your question?
I think so. The other question, I guess, when I think about driving around Jericho or any part of Vermont, really, there are, I guess, many places to me that seem like they would be valuable natural resources that don't have trees on them. But I guess aside from the riparian areas or the vernal pools, we don't have those. There's not really, you know what I'm saying?
I think so, but I mean, we have other resources mapped.
Okay.
So, I mean, we do have, you know, many resources that are mapped as part of our natural resource overlay. And also,
Yeah.
is that getting at what you're wondering about?
I guess so.
Right, so while we're focused at this particular moment on the forest, there's also, in addition, the natural resource overlay that's responsible for that.
The natural resource overlay has, well, first, in regulating things, they need to be mapped. You need to have a mapped resource. So our natural resource overlay currently maps upland natural communities, vernal pools, habitat for rare, threatened, and endangered species, and forested riparian habitats. So those are our primary ecological resources. And then our secondary ecological priorities are ledge, cliff, or talus areas. Another level of upland natural communities, buffers around vernal pools, the wildlife crossings, and the high elevation forest blocks. So those are all resources that are mapped. That does not include, there's also a wetlands overlay, which should be included in this, and then the river corridors. Those are separate overlays.
And if you had a 50-acre parcel and it was partially wooded, would there be someone, and you were looking to develop it, would there be someone to help advise you as to where the forest edge started and where the 300-foot line was, and how would that be sort of clarified in a real world way on a specific piece of land?
Well, I mean, I don't know how it works for existing resources. I would imagine it to be similar.
Yeah, I mean, the Conservation Commission is always willing to sit down and look at a map with somebody. And I think it's also available online if somebody wanted to do the look
Yeah, it just-
themselves,
it just-
but I mean, we're not, okay, like, yeah, we could help you identify resources. and go over the rules regarding them, but that's probably the extent of our expertise.
Was what some of my questions around, what, I know we're not at the red line, but that kind of gets to my questions around the red line. Because it relies on the DRB and the zoning administrator to make some of those calls, and are they qualified to, not qualified, do they have the necessary background knowledge to do so?
Well, and if you just look at that map that's up there, for example, like, I mean, I'm just, I don't, I mean, I'm generally all, very in favor of this. I'm just questioning, like, when you go out there, is it gonna be pretty clear where the squiggly line is? So you can start measuring your 300 feet.
Right, is your 300 feet start here or there?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a, anyway, that's kind of my question, I guess. And if we put this in there, I mean, 300 feet starts to be a very specific number. And so I'm just wondering, in a real, like, when this gets to DRB, how do they know?
I think it's being clear about whose responsibility it is
Right.
to do that kind of detailed understanding of your own, of the lot that is going to be developed. And so maybe Chris, make a note that that is something that needs to be clarified, whether it's the prospective developer / homeowner. Is it the DRB or Chris Flynn as the town, as the zoning administrator, or have we now created something that people need to hire a consultant?
I think that's really good, really good feedback to verify that. Because right now it's not defined.
But it is happening. Like this exists for other mapped resources.
Well, what we have found out in our overview is that it's really effective at keeping development away from the resources. I think this is probably going to be one of the first, you'll know better, but I think this is going to be a resource that's going to have more impacts on it.
But this is a much more expansive and nuanced
Yes.
read of our natural resources, which is great.
Oh.
But it also really makes you want to dial into a specific lot, and figure out, like, on this specific lot,
Yeah.
how does it really work? And I think it just gets harder.
Yeah, I'll need to look in that because these blocks do have boundary lines and they are mapped. You can view them in the map viewer. So they do land physically on a site. So
It is does the map viewer or whatever resource that has these maps have that? It must, because it looks like it shows it here, the 300 foot. I guess it's not a buffer because it's different than the way we think about other resources, but that 300 feet was indicated here, but is that easy to?
But if the map itself could include the 300 feet.
Right.
oh, it would.
Yeah. Right.
Like, why are we mapping? Like, is there a reason? Is there a reason to have that 300 feet included if it's not impacting regs? Like, I understand from looking at forest block and wanting to see the connectivity and the whatever, but should we not just be mapping I don't think it matters.
Well, we allow development in the forest edge, so that's what the 300, the Mike Green said, this is where you can do something.
There's also a relationship between the edge and the corridor.
The edge is the corridor in some cases.
Can you remind me what we're trying to answer? What are we trying to?
The big point on this one is that unlike other resources where we're saying if you're developing the resource, it's automatically a conditional use.
We're trying to allow people to have a permit.
Some flexibility to have a permitted use in the resource in areas that are not as sensitive.
Thank you. That was a really helpful reframing for me.
So my initial maybe naive question was, okay, well then why are we even mapping the 300 in this and in a regulatory setting? If the only place that's conditional is the,
Because there are still standards that would apply. You can't just, if you're building a house, you can't go in and clear cut.
Yeah.
That edge area, and there would be some, there would be some regulations that guide what you can do, and we'll get to those.
On that issue of regulations, you mentioned earlier that permitted uses within there include logging, natural resource extraction of that nature. Are you allowed to clear cut? So if you go into one of the forest sensitive areas and you do a clear cut of 5 acres, is it still a forest? Is it now developable for something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was thinking about that as Chris was asking his questions, like if you cut a forest through forestry, legitimate forestry work, and it's not there anymore, is it still showing? It's still showing up on our map.
Is it still protected the same way?
Yeah.
I mean, these blocks have been mapped and defined, like that wouldn't change until another survey. And some expert was done, like it wouldn't,
Maybe.
like these
No
don't.
trees, it's still a forest.
Yes, I think by these regulatory standards, because the regulation points to the mapped resource with a date and a report and a.
I think there's a clause somewhere though about if there's a discrepancy.
Yeah,
There's, isn't it somewhere in the red line that talks about if there's.
in the NRO,
Yeah.
if you are standing somewhere and you disagree with what the map says, you have the ability to ask for a review and impact study to show that the resource is not there as it's mapped. So that right falls on the landowner.
So if our goal is to try to encourage development, we want more houses. We also want to protect and keep intact certain forest blocks because of their unique natural support. That we want to provide flexibility in what we know to be a very large segment of our town that has forest block. What you're saying is if we give them the 350 feet buffer, we say, not within the court, but yes, within the buffer, you're allowed to do this without having to go through conditional use.
Correct. And this would be only on the part of the site where the map resource exists.
I would say very. I'm just saying, just that in concept. I think where it meets the goals that we're trying to achieve. If we already do have it mapped and it's clear that we know where that 350 piece is.
300.
Okay, sorry, 300 is where the 300 is. So we're not adding an additional burden to somebody who wants to build. So now they have to figure out where the 300 is and they have to hire someone else to make it happen. They are clear. Actually, I have a lot of flexibility here compared to the other place. Right? We've met our goals of trying to simplify it for a potential person who wants to make their land into housing while protecting natural resources, which is the balance we're trying to.
I would say yes, but I think there have been some good questions raised tonight that I want to look into and come back. Yeah.
But saying that if you can answer those questions, then how do other people feel that if we can answer those questions?
Hopefully we can.
We want to revisit once we know those answers.
This is also on the agenda for our next planning commission meeting,
Right.
so we'll have a chance to revisit it.
So at this point, Chris, do you want to see if there's any other questions before we? Or what else do you need from us?
Well, this is probably a better way to do it than, because what I have is going through all of these slides and saying, let's discuss. But it's probably better to have a short discussion after each of the slides.
Okay.
Any other questions before moving on?
On this slide.
Correct.
Okay.
Wendy, I don't like it. Okay. If I can go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So now we are getting into three sets of regulations that have to do with protecting specific resources. The first is forest block. So this is the new resource that's being added. What I have up here as a definition, defined as a contiguous area of forest at any state of succession. So I think that might answer a previous question about if you clear cut it. Is it still forest? And I would say if it's in any state of succession, probably yes. There's a longer, more detailed definition in the who's moving the mouse? There's a longer definition in.
Is that, Angeliki, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right.
We all good? Okay. These draft regulations emphasize, protecting as much tree cover as possible within the forest block, limiting building areas and road widths, and locating development in places where it maintains larger contiguous and connected areas of forest. So that's the goal. But there are more words that achieve those in regulatory language. Yeah.
I have a bit of a concern about the definition of area of a forest at any stage of succession. Because four-stage succession starts with an open field. Could be a farmer's field that he stopped feeling, or stop tending, stop putting seeds down, stop taking hay on, or whatever. Could be a clear cut, could be any number of things. And it could even be part of your backyard if you don't cut the grass for a little while. To me, that is just a little too open to, I really like that spot of land there. The guy hasn't cut the grass in the last 6 years. Let's call it a forest so it doesn't ever become anything else. And I think we don't want that to happen.
Well, that wouldn't happen because it would need to be mapped now. So it's not like we would in 5 years say, oh, we're going to call this field a forest block. It would need to be mapped now as part of the forest block assessment that Arrowwood did.
This doesn't say mapped as a forest as of this date. There's no as of this date if it's a forest in
But the
in
regulation.
April 21st,
But the
2026.
NRC is talking about our mapped resources.
But it's not, is it dated to the mapped resources as of this date, 2026?
Yes.
Right?
The
Yeah.
regulation has.
Yeah, the resources would be added to the map, and then that becomes the mapped resource as it exists on that map when it's added.
So if it had a date, would that alleviate your concern?
It would certainly help,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the definition well, I'm not gonna, never mind.
Yeah, the definition is more about what is a forest block.
Yeah.
As it relates to how the word forest block is used in the regulations and how, and the forest block that would then appear on the NRO map that would get codified as part of the zoning regulations if and when an updated map is adopted.
And this is a state definition?
I have to,
It's from Act 171, right?
yes,
Mhm.
that's right.
And it's also the definition that the environmental consultant used to create the maps. So it circles back to what
Yeah.
they used when they made our map.
Good to have consistency.
How long does it take for fallow land under that process to become no longer fallow land that's developable, but becoming a forest? If Arrowwood comes back the next week
Wait, but
and looks at something that was not a forest, but now it's been 3 years since it was last done anything with, are they going to say it's a forest?
No, because we're using data that was collected and is mapped and is not changing.
It's a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
And on the next iteration of the map, when they redo it,
It could be different,
it could be different.
right?
It could be if we went, if we had funding allocated and we brought them under contract and did the exercise again, but there's no time to do that. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does without a time limit on it, though.
We don't, because we don't have a commitment right now for updating any of the overlays at this time.
At this time.
At this time. So it's sort of, we're just saying that we're doing the best that we can, given the information that we have now. And with an understanding that there may be a time not identified yet, where there's the next planning commission, because you and I and the rest of us will be gone, is going to have to look at it. And
Well, I hope to live a little longer than that.
right?
Gone from the commission.
Right, but I'm thinking, so it might be that, there's the requirements, and then there's the recommendations that we can have in terms of like how often something should be updated. Could be a recommendation from us.
That would be appropriate.
Right.
That definition might be the place to say,
Right.
based on the most recent assessment.
Yep.
Okay, wait,
I wouldn't-
Wendy had something.
Well, I was just gonna reiterate, there is a process for if it's, if the reality on the ground is different than the map, there's a process for the landowner
Yeah.
to, I don't know, dispute whatever right word you want to insert.
Redress.
I would not want the wording to say as of the most recent assessment, because we are adding the forest blocks to the NRO map, which is like drawing a line in the sand, like that is the resource. It doesn't change unless it goes through a zoning update.
Yeah.
And
Or a new
updated-
NRO. Or an updated NRO.
Well, which would be part of a zoning update, yeah. But the map, the NRO map with the resource on it is the snapshot in time. It is the time limit. If that makes sense.
Does.
The only thing that flagged for me here was just, since we have forest block within the high elevation forest block, if there's anything that we need to be aware of or think about in making this definition and make sure that they're synergistic. I'm not saying that there is a problem.
Definition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a definition of it. I just didn't know if the addition of this meant that there was some.
The addition, this is being added as a separate resource. So
Yes.
everything that's in place that exists for high elevation forest blocks stays the same.
Yeah.
We are recommending one small addition, but forgot I said that. And then the forest blocks are getting added as a separate resource with its own requirements.
I understand that.
Okay. So maybe I didn't understand your.
Anytime you introduce a definition for a word that exists in another definition elsewhere, that just flags for me, oh, right, I just need to make sure that there's synergy there. That's all.
Got it. Then I'm gonna move to the next slide, because there is a separate definition for high elevation forest blocks, and it's forest blocks that are over 1,000 feet.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Does that address?
This is not my level of expertise, so I have no idea. It was just a flag of like, hey, we have this definition, just want to make sure that they're coherent, that's all. And I'm hearing experts say they are, so that's cool.
Cool.
Well, should there be a little bit different definition? Because it says all forested areas, but the block, which is not a forest block, it's saying a forested area.
This is a.
It's an
This is a
abbreviated.
synopsis. This is like
I
a,
simplified.
like a
Oh.
Cliff
for the
Notes.
purpose.
Okay.
All
Gotcha.
forested areas
Never
above the
mind.
contour line that is 200 feet
Yeah.
below any and all peaks that are at least 1,000 feet in elevation that are located within a contiguous habitat block.
So Chris, can you just make a note that you will double check that that there is not redundancy, but consistency, so that if somebody else were looking at the two definitions, there's no
question that we have now confused the public.
Yes.
Thank you. Because it's hard to do that as a group right now, particularly since we have abbreviations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The next resource is the high elevation forest blocks, which are forest. Well, they're actually, thank you for the clarification, they are forested areas above 1,000 feet because they would be part of a larger block. The proposal is just to keep the existing regulations for this resource, but to add text clarifying that development should be placed in such a way that it keeps large areas of forest blocks together.
Mhm.
Great, okay, thank you.
Does anybody else not have thumbs up?
You can speak for us.
Okay, I'm just.
No one
Chris,
thumbs down, so
okay, I'm just going with that, right? Silence equals acceptance, is that what we say, right?
So the third and last, for the regulations specific to a resource would be those for forest blocks and wildlife corridors. So a wildlife corridor is basically a path that lets an animal move from one habitat or a forest block to another. These would replace what is now called a wildlife road crossing. So that's where
Yeah.
that pink blob is getting, it would be updated to the more refined pathways for animal corridors. They emphasize just making sure that forest block and corridors stay connected. So they would include standards that would, emphasize placing development away from wildlife corridors, keeping 50% of the forest cover on each lot. Now, there would be an exception for small lots, particularly when you get into like the village and the low-density residential district. We may have lots that are much smaller, and we don't want to have a standard that means you can't develop at all. So there would be an exception for lots of a certain size that the 50% wouldn't apply. This prioritizes maintaining maintaining forest blocks along wildlife corridors and road frontages, and maintaining a functional wildlife corridor. So you can't put a building or something that blocks an entire wildlife corridor. There are existing regulations for fencing in the wild for what's now the wildlife road crossings, that would stay, that wouldn't come out. I just didn't put them up on the slide, but they're just existing regulations that would be maintained. Other questions about this?
are those state standard regulations or just Jericho regulations?
They are specific to, well, actually, I think they are in the Vermont state guide, the guide from.
I think that was taken from the guide.
Yeah.
Maybe tweaked a little bit for Jericho, but it came from a guide and was applied to our things.
The guide that we used to inform our work on forest blocks is the same guide that was used when the NRO was pulled together back in 2015. 19. Yeah, that's right, because the guide came
Or
out in 2015.
Mhm.
I think that's right.
I like the clarification of wildlife corridor versus road crossing.
Chris, looked like you might have had a question.
Nope, okay.
So the next two proposed standards cover how development within a forest block would take place. So this is where we're saying, well, if you can if you can build a permitted use within the 300 feet of in the 300 feet forest edge, this would be something that would guide how you could do that. The first is for building envelopes. So that's the area where buildings and clearings would be allowed on a lot. You can see it illustrated on the slide here. The proposed regulations for this include that building and clearing can only take place within that designated building envelope. It would give specific dimensions for how big that envelope would be for primary and secondary buildings. So right now we're proposing it's a 6,000 square feet building envelope for primary buildings and 4,000 for accessory buildings. This is what I'm most interested in getting feedback from the Regional Planning Commission and from developers to make sure that those are real, that it's not too constraining, or if they should be increased. That includes preference for placing new building envelopes within the forest edge or near existing development. That there would be no clearing or exterior lighting outside of the building envelopes, and requiring that these building envelopes be shown and recorded on plans.
Is there a requirement that any accessory unit be built connecting to the existing envelope?
Say that again?
Is it required that if I have 5 acres and I build on the northeast corner with my 6,000 square feet and I put an ADU on the southeast corner,
Oh, there's no requirement that they have to be connected. They can be co-linked.
you can actually have 2 building envelopes then, rather than 1 large building envelope?
4,000 square feet per ADU or structure.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Say that
need to
again?
be connected to the other one. It could be,
Right, so if you had a PUD, or PUD, you can, and maybe we're gonna be talking about whether or not you can have multiple primary structures on one lot.
Mhm.
If you were to do that, you would have one lot, you could have 2 primary structures, and your 6,000 square foot building envelope would be in 2 separate locations.
So it doesn't have to be contiguous.
Right.
Yes,
Okay,
or if you did the smaller one, you'd have 10,000
yeah,
combined.
okay.
Wait, what? So I'm sorry, did you just say,
So
can you
if
say
that
what you
was
said
your-
again, Chris?
If that was your lot. And
Yeah.
that building envelope as shown is 6,000 feet. And
Yeah.
you wanted to do an ADU over by the check mark. You could have a separate 4,000 square foot building envelope over by the check mark.
Is that right? So you can have 10,000 square feet of building envelope?
Permission to build 2 houses on 20 acres.
I understand. It's important because it's not clear in the regs, what we're talking about here.
here.
Well, as it's written down in the document, you
Yeah,
know,
you
it's 2. So I mean, I think so you've got an additional 4,000 square feet for an accessory building. So that's 10,000 square feet of building envelope total.
And they don't need to be contiguous.
They don't need to be contiguous
In the resource.
on a lot. If I wanted to have 2 primary buildings, 2 principals, would I have 12,000 square feet of
Yes,
building envelope? Okay, so it's per structure, not per lot.
correct.
Okay.
So that would be something to make sure is clear.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not. And then the other thing, and I realize that you're abbreviating, but it came up for me a couple of times. So there's the building envelope, but there's also additional clearing that you may do for road, driveway, utility corridor, etc.
Yes.
That is not part of building envelope. So that's not part of your 6,000.
Correct, and there's, I can't recall what it is off the top of my head, but there is something.
Yeah, there's yeah. Okay, so those are, okay. And then I had another question about the building envelope. Okay, so building envelope doesn't include access, it doesn't include. We talked about the contiguous. It doesn't have to be contiguous. I'll find my other question. I can't remember where it was.
The last line in the regulations, as drafted, talk about the total area of clearance on a lot should be minimized to the extent feasible and should be considered in determining compliance with the standards of the section. So if it does go to the DRB, ideally, you're not gonna have 5 building envelopes right next to each other in a clearing of 30,000 square feet. The provision was intended to have some discretion of the DRB to help minimize the impact of a full scale clearing.
Is there a minimum uncleared requirement between dwellings then?
No.
Is that something to add? So using this, if your second one is 30 feet of forest between your cleared area and your envelope and their envelope, the next envelope. Or 40 feet or 50 feet or 10 feet or 5 feet.
I think that something like that could work when you're in a district that has larger lots, but we have some districts that are gonna have smaller lots, and so I'd be reluctant to put a standard that makes it harder to build housing on a small.
But to your point, if someone wants to have 3 of these and it's gonna clear out 30,000 square feet contiguously, is that something that should be encouraged, or should we try to find a way to discourage that? In the middle of a forest block, for example.
I think having a clear limit of 6,000 square feet, and if you've got 3 that are next to each other and you're clearing 18,000 square feet, that's pretty good. Even if it is contiguous. Is my thought, but I know, Chris, you have your hand up too, but.
Go ahead.
Sabina, did you want to say anything?
No, Chris can go first.
Well, my question is, how does the building envelope relate to like a cottage court?
Yeah. Yeah, because if you have a fourplex, say you have a fourplex, that would be a primary building. But maybe they're,
But let's say you're doing a PUD and you want to do 6,000 square foot small houses. How does that relate
Yeah.
to the 6,000 square foot building envelope?
I'm really glad you asked that question, Chris, because I was trying to figure out how to ask the question, like put together this conversation tonight with the conversation I was in yesterday about how we're going to incentivize or encourage small housing and clustered.
Mhm.
So.
yeah, these are all really, this is why we have a planning commission. Yeah,
Right.
to talk through these things.
Yeah, because I think we wouldn't want to do this in a way that then prevents some of those other goals.
Yeah. It's easy to say, well, we want to encourage those types of uses in areas that aren't forested and on the parts of the sites that don't have forest cover, but. I think that's being too glib because there may be sites that are entirely forest cover and how do we deal with that?
Yeah.
That could easily support a really nice little cottage court development.
Mm-hmm.
Do our ADU rules say that you have to have the same driveway? Shared driveway?
I don't think it's
I seem to recall a
specified.
case we had way back when, where there was a person who had a U-shaped lot. With this, in the center of the U was somebody else's property, and they wanted to put an ADU on the other side of it. And I think we had to agree that that could work. So yes, you don't have to have a shared driveway there.
I don't know about the ADU regulations. I do know that what we have pulled together for this has language that encourages sharing of driveways and corridor and utility corridors to the extent practical or something like that.
But not requiring that.
I think that's right.
I remember a lot of discussion about it. I don't remember where we ended up.
Must share the same access and driveway as the single household dwelling.
Right.
Yeah, you were right, Sabina.
So how did that case come out then, where the person wanted to have
Don't know.
the house on a separate driveway because of the way their land was shaped? But I don't remember the outcome of that. I know it came in front of the planning commission.
I don't remember.
I remember it. I thought it was more of a hypothetical than real world case, but I,
Which number is that associated with, SJ?
In the regs,
Yeah, what you just.
it's 4.7.3.
Oh, you're talking about the ADU regs.
Yeah.
Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, that was really good. The last.
Sorry.
One set of, what's that?
We're
Keep
just laughing at
saying
me.
yarn.
Keep
You're
going,
good.
keep going.
The last set, has to do with, preventing habitat fragmentation. Which is when large areas of forest blocks are broken up into smaller pieces. The proposed regulations encourage taking advantage of existing topography. They're intended to keep roads within the resource to be narrow and short without excessive turns. To prioritize shared resources like roads, driveways, and utility corridors where possible. And then reinforce clustering of development and placing development as close as possible near existing development.
What I don't see is if you're looking at the left picture, right, which shows fragmented development, and if you take out the outer, the outer 7 or 8, and you just look at the one that comes off the center bottom, and then it branches off into the first 2 houses, right? So these 2, right? How?
She's talking about these 2 right here.
Right, so based on what you just said would be possible, you had your building envelope and then your ADU. How is that not creating fragmentation? If that picture shows fragmentation and what we just described is that in a nutshell.
You mean,
If you think of the one where the arrow is the primary and the next one is the secondary.
Right. Because we
not
just-
requiring the
because we just think
accessory
you
to
could
shift,
4,000 square foot,
not requiring that the building envelopes be contiguous is
something like that. I mean,
fragmentation.
I'm just thinking about what that,
In practice.
what that looks like is that.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not saying it is, I'm questioning.
No, I
It makes that more likely to occur.
Right, so I'm wondering.
but I think
if that has to be refined in some way.
cluster development and located as close as possible to existing nearby development. So if I want to put in an accessory, I'd be encouraged, whatever
But doesn't-
weight that word has, to do it close to the existing principle.
but doesn't the ADU section require that it share a driveway? Isn't that what you just read?
Well,
Yes,
that's-
but
yeah.
in this, like, it
But-
wouldn't, in theory, that would,
You're saying that center road could be the driveway.
Yeah. and
Yeah,
just take the
that's what
first
she's
2 out,
saying.
Right,
Right.
those are the 2 houses.
Was that your thinking, Eric, when you were saying, should there be a stated distance between?
Part of it, yeah.
but so if, so you're encouraged to put that building envelope right, your accessory right next to your principal. But if topography doesn't allow,
We don't have to dwell on it, it just strikes me as
Yeah.
being like
Counter to what?
counter.
Yeah. I feel like having defined limits on what you can clear is a big step in getting and achieving the goal. I would want to give flexibility to where they're located to achieve the housing goals that we want. The trade-off is that you've got a smaller defined footprint for your building. That's just my thinking.
I'm in favor of more housing. We need it. We know we need it. So, yeah, if this gets us more housing, that's a good thing.
so I don't want to, I think it's worth thinking through. If you think, I'm looking at the definition of habitat fragmentation, which the
Sabine?
division or conversion of tracts of significant wildlife habitat into smaller pieces, leaving remnant patches of habitat that vary in size and isolation, separated by developed or otherwise non-forested lands. So that's where that example that you pull out in isolation of the rest doesn't, to my mind, meet the definition of fragmentation.
Oh, that's
But if
active illustration of the concept of habitat fragmentation.
Well, I'm still kind of stuck on Sabina's point and trying to kind of think it through. And so if we're talking about in isolation, a parcel with a principal and an accessory where the building envelopes are not contiguous, that doesn't rise, in my mind, to the definition of fragmentation. Whereas this, you've now got an island, essentially. You've got a bunch of little islands. Like that looks like fragmentation to me.
But isn't that what would happen if you were one of those was your primary unit and the other one was an accessory dwelling unit, and you happen to have it either across the street from you or up the road from you, still within your lot, but it is now a separate.
Yeah, I'm arguing no.
You're arguing that it would not be fragmentation.
Correct. But I think that we can think about it further.
Right. We could probably move.
Yeah, well, now I'm thinking these illustrations might be helpful in illustrating a concept, but you might have a series in a forested area where what you see there on the left might be a good outcome.
Well, and I also think that this is where the actual like regs that come after that really kind of ask you to prioritize things as you're laying out your plan kind of makes sense, because it's the idea is to cluster and to avoid doing these kinds of things. Given, the understanding that each lot and the lots that it neighbors are.
Chris, where did the 6,000 and 4,000 envelopes, where did those numbers come from?
It was the best I could come up with based on research that I couldn't find anything. It was interesting because the guidelines said to be specific, did not provide examples.
So where my brain went, because I had a similar question of like, where did these arbitrary numbers come from? So then because all previous meetings don't exist in my mind, and I just had the slide deck for today's meeting in front of me. I was looking at the examples that started the meeting with of just like buildable whatever that have nothing to do with this. I was just trying to like conceptualize in my mind. And so the commercial district building envelope that you had for that particular example is 4,900 square feet. I was like, okay, well, that's, I guess, a reasonable. So in my mind, that was like, okay, well, I guess that's a reasonable number, but I had a similar, like, where did these come from? And what are they trying to achieve? Because if what we're trying to do is minimize clearing, then we should talk about all kinds of clearing. Which we do, you're right, there is a spot later that talks about like not clearing more than whatever, but that has to do with roads and.
So if everything that is in what got sent out to look at, the 6,000 and 4,000 square feet is where my biggest question mark is. That I want to follow up with developers and to talk to some people to truth it.
Mhm.
I mean, they may come back and say 10,000 square feet makes sense, but 6,000 is like not doable. Or yeah, 6,000 square feet is plenty. So that's just more work that I've got to do.
So if you're gonna have those conversations, what would be really great is to include in those conversations, the asking someone who's like going to think it through very practically, what would it take for you if this were the regulation to want to do clustered housing
Oh, yeah.
versus something else?
Yeah,
Well, knowing
Right.
you're gonna have to put in a septic. And you can't have stuff around, like you have to clear some for a leach field.
so there are exceptions for. So I'd have to
Utilities, right?
look through and find it, but there are, yeah,
But that's not part of the building. So that's fine, so that doesn't matter.
Okay. I just feel like there might be some
Septic part of the
questions.
building envelope?
sorry, there are two things.
Sorry, I apologize. You go ahead. I interrupted.
So SJ's point, is septic and well part of the building envelope?
I have to go back and look through these to see how it's phrased, but they are addressed in this, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Because they have to be cleared ground for septic, certainly.
Yes. Yeah, so I think there's something about an exception for providing those types of utilities. But Heidi, I also wanted to circle back to what you were saying. The people that had talked to are very early on back in the summer. One of the questions was specifically about, cottage courts and so we got some feedback on that, but it would be good to check in with them again on that too.
Give you my document.
That would be great.
There's a bunch of places where you mentioned paved. It's paved surfaces, and I'm wondering if that's impervious.
Yes. Well, I need to go back and check and make sure. Yeah.
Like,
Well, are you looking at the slides or are you looking at the? Yeah, that would be good to double check. Great. So we don't need to do this because we've done it for each of them. So what I'm hearing generally is that this seems okay. There were some specific questions for me to follow up on and report back at our next meeting. Maybe not.
Oh.
Oh, I was reading SJ.
This meetings were,
Now's the time.
it's more nitty gritty and organizational than what you did here. I had a hard time kind of going through, following through 6.7.5.1 and moving on, because it bounced around between, like in what I kept wanting to do and grouping in my mind as I was reading them to understand was like a section on the developing considerations, like what do you need to have in mind when you're doing stuff to the land versus each specific naturally or not naturally protected natural resource,
I have the
what
same,
to keep in mind. And I really
Yes.
wanted those two things separate.
I had the same response.
Okay,
Yes.
so I had a suggestion on how to do it, but I couldn't. Like, we'd be talking about building envelopes, and then we're talking about vernal pools, and then we're talking about clearance for road structures, and then we're talking about habitat fragmentation, and I was
Yeah.
just like, I can't.
You can't
I'm
process it.
I'm smiling because as I was working on these, I had the same reaction and I had to
And
I had to focus on trying to maintain the regs as they are intact and just try to insert what we have
Yeah.
and not do a total, yeah. But I hear what you are saying, and yes.
If that's the goal, Chris, for whatever reason, I'm sure there's a very good reason that's a goal to keep things intact with slight changes. Can we have an addendum that puts it side by side or something?
Yes, so this is something else. This is like a whole other thing. We have what would be super helpful for a number of things in our regulations would be to have like a design guide,
Or
The-
cheat sheet?
right?
Yes.
That takes all of this stuff and organizes it in a way that is more user friendly instead of
Yes.
in a regulatory format. Yes, it's on a list of
Okay,
things to do.
you know what's really good at that? Okay.
The reorganization. Yeah,
I'm just offering this.
I do think though that it's helpful for us as we're talking about making amendments. To see it within the context, like just the way that it exists here. It's much easier to see what's been changed, what's been moved, what's been deleted, but then rewritten to be like, it does make sense when you're making decisions about. Altering existing language to see it that way, but
say that again.
it was helpful for me to be able to see line by line the
Oh, yeah.
changes within, so that I could compare it to what was there before, and I could see how you slightly tweaked a sentence to do whatever it is that we were wanting to have happen. So seeing it in its original context makes it really easy to understand what the amendment is doing to the original text and blah, blah, blah. But for the finished product, in terms of a user experience, man,
Yeah.
would it be helpful to have
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, like even thinking about how to present it here, I did not present it as it is sequenced in the regulations.
Which we appreciate.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna be honest.
Wendy, did you?
No, I was concurring. I had the same problem.
Yeah. I relate.
Call.
Oh,
Oh, well, are we up to public comment? Are we taking,
You said you'd be in common after the section.
Are we at the end of the?
are we?
yes.
I'm saying, are we at that point?
We don't have public comment other than number 3 on the agenda.
Well, you asked me not to talk about this.
It's not a question of whether you, it's just a question of is now did we get?
Okay, sure.
I would encourage you to talk with some real life loggers. So they're sort of on the ground and understand those regulations, because often logging is the beginning of the development process, particularly in our section of Vermont. So as I understand it, as I recall, and I may be on see some check, you can clear cut up to 40 acres before you need a permit to do it. And also the regulations on the roads you can build that you log are pretty loose. So what happens is people will build real roads to do logging, and then when they'll come to do permitting, they can say, oh, roads are already there, and put the roads where they want them. When they're doing logging, and then when the time comes to the permit, they say, well, the road's already there, already goes over the road, or, so I think understanding it kind of from that point of view would be helpful. The second thing is, because you kind of go through this and look at what, things we want to protect, there's forest block in the 1 acre zone. A good portion of our most valuable agricultural land is in the 1 acre zone. And we have a map that was first written in 1973 and hasn't changed in 53 years, basically. So we basically keep this, and the population has more than doubled since then. But the overall development pattern of the town has changed really dramatically since that map was written. It just seems like it would, and what happens is we keep, and other towns have a much more granular map. We look at the zoning for Essex and, some of towns, Essex, towns compare Colchester, there's much more granular. And we have it sort of non-granular with enormous blocks And whenever we're thinking about making a change, immediately think of the a section in that large area where that change would be inappropriate, kind of for that plot. So there are sections in the 1 acre zone where we need to be serious about protecting agriculture and forest block. And there are areas in the agricultural zone that really should be, dense housing. And there are places, where just the character of the town is just changed. On Plains Road, we start out, from Brown's Trace, where there's no minimum lot size. Then you go to a 3 acre lot, then you go to a 4 acre lot, then you go back to 3 acre lot, all in a, in a piece where the nature of what could happen on that road has changed a lot since 1973.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so the last discussion item on the agenda is related to standards for what qualify as a minor and major subdivision. Like I said before, I think this has generally been agreed to by the planning commission, but it hasn't been stated explicitly. So I wanted to circle back to that. This relates to a comment from the Development Review Board to clarify whether or not an originating lot, or like the initial lot that's being subdivided, whether that counts toward the number of lots that qualify as whether a subdivision is minor or major. And then also the length of time that you are tracking when those lots are being subdivided. So what I'm hoping is to get confirmation that this is what the consensus was, but this is why I want to put it on the agenda. So the proposed amendment is to not count the originating lot toward the total count. So that is different than how the regs are currently interpreted, and it would effectively increase the number of lots that qualify as a major subdivision from 4 to 5. There would be a corresponding change to the minor subdivisions that would increase the number of lots that counted toward that from 3 to 4. Also, the time period, the recommendation is to reduce the time period for when that takes place. It's currently 120 months or 10 years, and reducing that to 60 months or 5 years. I went back and looked at the information I had for other towns. When I did the PUD assessment, I pulled some of this information. Charlotte is similar to what we have now, which I don't think is a model. It's probably not a model we want to follow. Shelburne and Milton are more in line with what we're thinking, what this proposal is. It's a like 5 lots in Shelburne qualifies as a major subdivision, and in Milton it's 5 years. There are other stipulations that I don't really want to. I want to keep it relatively simple. Like Milton has requirements that if you subdivide a lot, but one of those lots can be further subdivided, there's a way that they take that into consideration, and I think that gets too complicated. So anyway, does the planning commission generally support not including the originating lot and reducing from 10 to 5 years?
Yes, I have a question. So if you have a lot and year 1, you break off a piece. And then year 3, you want to break off a second piece. Does the 5-year period start from when you first do the first lot?
Yes. Yes.
And then after 5 years, it resets.
No, it would be rolling.
So if you do, as Chris was saying, year 1, I subdivide into 2 lots. I've done 3 years. I got 5 years until I can do another one. Or I can do.
Well, it looks back. So, if you do a subdivision, it would need to be the 5th lot over a 5-year period. If you did your first lot 6 years ago, and say you only created 3 lots during those 5 years, then it wouldn't count.
So in year 6, you could do another 5, even if you sold lots 2. and
Right, because it
3,
would be rolling,
3.
it'd be rolling based on the date of the subdivision application that's being considered. Does that make sense?
That's,
The first one, second one, third one. Using Chris's example, you've got 5 acres that you want to subdivide.
Mm-hmm,
Say, okay, I'm gonna subdivide this into 1 acre.
mm-hmm,
Selling an acre.
okay.
It's sold on year 1. Year 2, I want to sell another acre. Sold on year 2. Am I counting 5 from the sale of year 1, or 5 now from year 2?
You're counting 5 from the date of the subdivision application that's being considered. You're not counting the date from either of those.
So same it, I applied for subdivision application for 1. Got it, great, I've got 5 years. 2 years later, I'm applying for another subdivision application for number 2.
Then you look
That's
back,
fine.
you look back 5 years from that application and see how many subdivisions have been within that 5 years.
So it's rolling.
Yeah. The date, I think that is, the date that would be important is the date that the subdivision's approved. And then the date that you apply for a subdivision.
For the next subdivision. You do multiple subdivisions on your lot.
Correct.
but if you did one a year, you could keep going.
Yes.
indefinitely.
Well, this is where the definition
Yeah,
that you have for
doesn't
parent
seem right.
person. I don't think that it's clear, like, I think that Chris is pointing out an ambiguity that is worth thinking about. But one of the things that I grounded myself in trying to answer that question was the definition, but the gross definition for parent parcel. All lots created from that parcel within the preceding 5 years shall be counted in determining subdivision thresholds. That sentence and the definition.
So is that one saying that the 5 years starts on the date of the initial subdivision?
All lots created from that parcel, from the parent parcel. Within the preceding 5 years shall be counted in determining subdivision thresholds. So I don't read that as rolling.
You don't read this as rolling.
No, I don't either.
I don't read that as rolling at all. And it speaks to examples that we have. Because it's all tied to the parent parcel. And so if you chop off, if you start with 1 and then you create 2. And then you want to subdivide 2, that's still part of the parent parcel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tied to that initial subdivision. And then you want to create 3. That's still tied to the parent parcel from the initial subdivision, not from the subsequent rolling subdivision.
I see.
So
At some point, that originating parcel doesn't get counted anymore. Yeah,
you're no longer tied to that parcel.
But then I would say again, you could keep going indefinitely.
So can I just take pause for 1 second? Is the intent and do we want it to be allowed to go indefinitely? Like, let's just. I'm not clear if that's something we want or we don't want. Did we?
Well, I would say you could make a case where a developer has a big parcel of land and he's gonna do $1 million house per year. And he could avoid going through the major subdivision work this way by doing 1 a year indefinitely. Because and maybe he's the size that's what, as much as he could build in a year. So it would work perfectly for him.
It goes, then there would in that example, which is your point, Chris, then it makes having a time period irrelevant to some degree.
Well, I like the
Because if
idea.
you reset the clock with each
Yeah.
subdivision, then it doesn't, then there's no clock.
And that quickly starts in time for long-term developmental review on it.
And I don't know.
So is the issue that the definition ties it back? I'll have to think about this, because if that 5 years is not included in the definition,
The 5 years is included in the definition.
but
If
if,
the definition is more clear. Is what provided clarity for me to understand.
I think we are still having a conceptual question about whether or not the planning commission actually wants rolling or doesn't want. it.
oh,
I think the answer, I think the answer to the question of going from 10 years down to 5 years, are we in favor of that? I think is a yes. The question of, are we in favor of going from essentially, what is it? It's currently interpreted as 4 up to 5. Is that right? Is that a
Yes.
change?
yeah,
Is, I think, what we've discussed. What we have discussed, and so then I think the question is, like this is already the 10-year way that the regs are currently being read is not rolling. It's all tied to that parent parcel.
over 10 years.
Over 10 years, and we're just saying, no, let's do it over 5. It turns out that there is an additional ambiguity, not just about whether the parent parcel counts, but when that clock resets. Which I think I personally think that you addressed in your definition of parent parcel, but that might be worth like
Making sure that that's what we want.
making sure that that effectively does what we've been doing.
I mean, speaking for myself, I think what I would like is to allow an individual landowner the flexibility to break off pieces for example, family members over time. But I don't think we necessarily want to allow a developer the freedom to do what ultimately would be a major subdivision without going through DRB process for it.
Yeah, I mean, the goal, one of the reasons that this became an important topic is that it really stands in the way and prevents the incremental growth that we talked about, because it makes it difficult for an individual landowner to break off chunks of land more than whatever without going through major subdivision, which is a whole shebang. So the moderate approach was to cut the time in half. And by including the parent parcel, we kind of increased the number of creative parcels that would trigger major. But Chris, are you saying that doesn't go far enough?
Well, I guess I'm torn. I came in thinking this was good and I liked the direction we're going in, but I'm just thinking, I don't like the idea that it could be a loophole for a big developer to do, 50 unit development of $1 million houses, because that's not what we want.
If the definition was changed to, rather than it says a parcel of land as it existed 5 years prior to the date of a subdivision application, if it was changed to the first subdivision application?
That seems to be the direction going, is saying that the 5-year clock starts with the first subdivision. And you've got 5 years to do these ones, and after that, you have to go through another round with this. And it resets after 5 years to 0, and you can now do another 5 or whatever the number is you decide. To keep you away from it. That would not prevent what Chris is talking about.
Well, it almost feels like it's another one of those where it's about also tying it somehow to incentivizing or finding a way of making it attractive, whatever that means, to not have each and every parcel be mansion. Right, if it's gonna be a one-off. Because I'm hearing it's a combination of two, it's both the how many and then what.
So did you suggest having a square footage dollar threshold, that if you're,
I think I don't want to do that, but it's the risk. It's the risk that every action, there's no foolproof anything, right? It's the risk that we're saying, and is there a greater on balance benefit by allowing a more moderate approach to what becomes a needing to go through a planned unit development? How many times and in what amount of time that it is worth it to us to do that? So I go back to what SJ said, that given what you have written, what was the original question, Chris should be. Yes, we had said we wanted to make it so a major development was 5 instead of 4.
And 5 instead of 10.
And 5 instead of.
But this is a different question. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I need to figure out how to graphically show this so that I myself can get my head around how this would work.
Okay. Okay, so shall we hold off until Chris Sheeny has an opportunity to study around what SJ just said?
Well, it sounds like the answer to this is yes, but there wants to be an understanding of how it would actually, what the implications of it actually are. Is that fair? Yeah.
The practical implications.
Yes.
and maybe some specific limitations on what you can do in that 5-year period.
All right.
And again, our big goal is to allow people more flexibility so that we get.
Yeah. And that they can use their properties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think what we should also say is one of the reasons we've talked about this too, is so that people who want to stay in Jericho can stay in Jericho by not going.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not feeling like they need to leave our community that they can't afford to stay. Which I think is a really important value that we have.
Or make it possible for their children to.
Right, exactly. So I think grounding it in that value is really.
I just went ahead and advanced the slide.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Let's do that.
This public comment is not on our written agenda.
I don't think it ever is it?
It'll be the one at the end of the day. It used to be.
Is this the end of our?
Yeah, we just have a few.
So
You've been doing really well at getting of keeping these meetings to hours. Well, what was that? Oh, right. You're fresh and dewy eyed.
Okay, are there any comments from online? Oh, Martha has her hand up. Okay. Martha, can you unmute yourself? Or do you need me
I
to?
think she is unmuted.
She is. Okay, go ahead, Martha.
I don't know if she can hear us.
You're okay to give your comment now, Martha?
Maybe we can go in and test at the back.
Yeah, we'll circle back if for some reason you're having trouble. So after public comments comes the town planner report.
Oh, yeah, so just two quick things. So continuing to work with our consultant on the Riverside Village development scenarios, the fiscal analysis. I've pulled together a development scenario that looks like at what would happen if it was just all on-site septic and the engineering working group of the wastewater task force verified that it looked like they verified it was a reasonable assumption about how that would play out. So we'll be sharing that with the consultant so they can build that out. So that all is going well. The other thing which I didn't have on the slide, but
That
yeah,
would be on-site septic done by the developer. The town is not
correct,
participating in the
correct,
municipal system.
correct. It was if we did, so there's baseline, which is what's there today.
Yeah,
And then if we did not do a community septic system, and it did assume that there would be smaller community wastewater facilities throughout the area. So you'd have multiple lots on a community system, so maybe 3 or 4 lots on one system, which actually reduces the requirement for how much of septic capacity you need by like you only need 150% capacity as opposed to 200. So anyway,
okay.
yeah. Did you have? No, okay. And then last night the Housing Incentives Working Group had its first meeting. So I thought it was a good discussion. I don't know if Eric and Heidi, if you wanted to say anything about that.
It's great. The different perspectives and questions from folks from the housing committee as well as from the DEI group. Because it caused us to have questions in a way that maybe this group went, so I was really appreciative of that.
Yeah, so we've got Frederic and Sue Castor on that working group. It really was I really enjoyed the discussion and making progress on that. Our next meeting is May 7th.
And Chris has has a whole bunch of things that we asked him to prepare for that. So he's got a lot of work to do.
Work on that.
Well, I was going to say it's not too much, but it's a list. There's like
It's gonna acknowledge that we gave you tasks and you were very kind to catch them.
And you were very kind in offering to help with that, so.
Right? I'm always, I may not be knowledgeable, but I'm willing.
Do we have any liaison reports from planning commissioners?
I would just say that Susan put together a great letter to send to the state regarding Act 250.
Awesome.
Which the select board approved and will be sending out shortly.
Should we change our select board liaison from Susan to you?
Well, I was wondering that.
Yeah.
Is it still permitted to be on select board and one of the commissions?
It's legally allowed.
Great.
There's question as to. There's some room for debate as to whether it's a good idea. And there's some room for, in my head, of do I really have the template? Do I really want to do that? But there would be moments of conflicts of interest.
You'd opposite side with the planning commission every time.
You don't have to answer that.
Not publicly.
That housing committee met last week. Due to scheduling, we won't meet again until, well, we won't have a committee meeting again until July, and so in the next couple of weeks, we're hoping, or in the next 2 months, we're hoping to put our energy towards recruitment. So if you know of anybody who has kind of a background in or expertise in or a real genuine interest in housing development kinds of things, definitely point them our way. I think we're hoping that we'll have enough interest that maybe we can have a public kind of information meeting that won't be on the second Tuesday, because again, the scheduling conflicts where we have the conversation that we would typically have with someone who's interested in joining the committee. They'll just do it in ad hoc time. But anyway, so if you have anyone who's interested, please have them reach out. And then we also kind of laid out our work plan for the next year, what we're hoping to focus our attention on. A lot of it is continuing projects that we've started, and prioritizing slightly different things. One of the newest, biggest pushes is to really think about the 10-acre zones, and trying to find answers to some of the questions that repeatedly come up when we talk about housing in the 10-acre zones, and try to grapple with some of that and make some recommendations. I think our next round of recommendations will have a lot to do with both 10-acre zoning and the kinds of expertise and resources that the town might want to prioritize having in order to really see development projects on a scale that makes sense for Jericho actually happen. So if someone does have a large plot of land that they're interested in developing for senior housing, and they also want to conserve part of it for whatever, like, who would they call, and what kinds of questions would they need, and would the town need to be able to answer for them to help encourage those kinds of things instead of leave them out on them.
Was anyone up on the committee yesterday that talked to Heinsberg at all? I got down this rabbit hole.
Heinsberg is doing great stuff.
They're doing great stuff. And
Yeah.
I mean, they've done some rezoning to be more granular in their one rural district, and to make it, more areas of it more residential and keep more.
That's
rural.
a good idea. One of the things that came up for us was our own kind of education. We have been doing a lot of it early on and have lagged a little bit in the last couple of years. And so that might be very early on. We interviewed other planners and other housing committees, but Heinsberg in particular might be a good one because they've been doing a lot in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, and you look at Wilson that has inclusionary zoning, but doesn't seem to be resulting in anything.
Yeah.
But Heinsberg seems to be doing it.
Yeah, and they also do, I'll give another plug to them. They do a great ADU workshop every year.
They also have infrastructure and an official map.
Hey,
Well, and this is Chip Sawyer, the planner there.
it was Alex Weinhagen, who's now on the
Blur.
state land use review board and working on tier 3 things.
Somebody who works here at 100%.
Oh, I think our town administrator.
It's the
Oh,
town
that's
manager.
it.
Yeah.
All right, that was the connection. Just,
Did everyone have a turn? Did everyone have a turn? Okay. I went to the VCDA, Vermont Community Development Association meeting last week. And the 3 big topics that they covered during the course of the day, it was an all day meeting in Montpelier, were CHIP, which we've started to discuss here, and so it was a lot of information about CHIP. They talked a little bit about a new thing that is sort of coming down the pike, which is a Vermont Land Bank, and how that can be used by towns to sort of help them as a, like, acquire land in a stopgap kind of way. And so they talked about land banks in general and how the Vermont Land Bank is being formed right now. And then the third thing that they covered was small scale development and how to attract small scale developers to your community, and the things that need to be discussions and things that need to happen for that. So it was a pretty good day of information.
So do you use a small scale development and commercial development?
No,
Okay.
like small scale, well, it could be commercial, I guess. It's not, are you saying like not residential but
Yeah.
commercial?
Yeah.
It could be either, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anything that we should? Any big tips and?
Oh, well, I don't think in the context, in this next 5 minutes, I can probably summarize it, but I did take notes, and I've submitted my notes to the Community Development Corp, like to Peter, who's the chair of that, so that he has my notes and some of the
Great.
slides.
That just reminded me, I just wanted to give a plug for two housing things. It's not too late if you're interested on this Saturday. There's a From Housing Justice to Civic Power, a Vermont Action Summit. It's from 2 to 6 this Saturday at the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Burlington. There is a remote option. It's free. Renters, resident leaders, housing advocates, interested community members, blah, blah, blah. If you're interested, I'll throw the link to it. And then also the Chittenden County Housing, Regional Housing Convening is Wednesday, April 29th. Again, that's something that
I'll ask before Adjourn.
I almost always try to attend. There's usually a good kind of informational piece at the beginning. And then there's a roundtable where a representative from each town talks about what they've been doing for housing in their town. And it's a nice place to get ideas, but also to connect with folks and collect resources.
Okay. So that wraps up our liaison reports. I'm just gonna circle back. Martha, we did get a chance to give you an opportunity to speak before. Is there anything you wanted to say for public comment? Right. Okay. Well, as you know, if there's anything that you would like to say, didn't get a chance to, you can always put it in writing and send it to Chris Shaheen, and he'll reach out to you. So your voice can still be heard. Okay, any other business? Okay, so our next meeting is on May 5th.
Please. How did that happen?
Cinco de Mayo, at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
Get it. Well pointed.
Do we know what we're talking about or not yet?
We'll have a follow-up on NRO and
Okay.
talk about multiple primary buildings on a line.
Okay, all right. So I think that's it, right?
Do we take a motion to?
No, I'm gonna,
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't.
Got it.
I meant, are we at that point?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we are.
Is there a motion
I'd like to move to
adjourn?
adjourn.
SJ moves to adjourn second.
Also,
Eric, all in favor of adjourning, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any no's? All right. Thank you very much.
All right.